head in hopes that y'all can get a better view of what I'm doing. You know, some of the videos, it's probably been hard to see exactly what I'm doing. I mean, I think you got most of it, but let's see if we can get a better view. So bear with me here. I'm always a little awkward getting this on the tripod. I'm actually hanging the tripod because I couldn't get it to stick, even though it's got octopus legs. So I'm starting a little later than I planned because since I have several doll dresses to make, oh, this is going to be perfect. Since I have several doll dresses to make, oops, it won't let me rotate. Okay, all right, come back. There we go. Since I have several doll dresses to make, it made sense to cut out all the fabric at once, right? I'm going to try to reposition this a little bit, get back up here, see what you can see, make sure I'm in the view of the camera. Most of my work areas up front right here. And actually, let's go ahead and move these two dresses. These dresses are so cute, don't you think? All right, so I need to, let's try this. There we go. I think that'll work. I'll try to do my best to stay in the view of the camera. Thanks for joining me today. So we're going to do a sew-in marathon here. Try to get as much done as on this dress as we possibly can. The first thing we want to do is we have all our pieces cut out. We've got everything cut out except the elastic for the sleeves. I didn't do that, but that won't take much effort. Let's go ahead and get our sewing machine threaded. To start, I would like to finish the edges of the fabric. Super important so it doesn't ravel. And it's easy to get distracted and forget to do that. So I can get my glasses on here to thread my sewing machine. I just love this doll dress pattern. I think they're so cute. And we're doing a couple of these for Bowl for the Cure. And then we have a lot of little girls in our family. I'm going to just put this on the zigzag pattern. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Well, let's start over. There we go. This is where we're adjusting our stitch length a little smaller. Okay, so let's just go ahead and finish the edges. Looks like I cut out an extra one here. That's okay. So this is the bodice front, and we are going to zigzag our edges. And the purpose of doing that is we don't want our fabric to fray, right? So I got a little spot here where I didn't quite get it cut. Probably wouldn't matter, but we'll just get that. I have lots of tea in a little pot here next to me so I don't run out of stuff to drink. When I'm talking, I always need something to drink. So we're going to zigzag the edges. And if you do what I did and just miss part of it, just come back over it. It's actually not a bad idea to go over it twice. I mean, it's not mandatory, but we want our finished product to be as nice as possible, right? Actually, glasses would help. So I'm working with dark fabric with dark thread, right? These little parts are kind of boring, but they make a huge difference. And if you're going to do what I'm going to do and make multiple outfits, it makes sense to go ahead and, let me just pull that off. It makes sense to go ahead and cut out several at once. Especially, let's say you wanted to do this for a business. I'm not a business, but let's say you did want to do this for a business. Even though it's boring, if you can do multiples of the same thing repeatedly, you'll be able to do it faster and more efficiently from a production standpoint. And so even though I'm not selling these doll dresses, I have several to make. So from a production standpoint, it makes great sense to go ahead and cut several out at once. Although we're only going to work on sewing one of them today. But again, if you're going to do this from a production standpoint, it would make really good sense to go ahead and do all the pleats in the skirt, right? On all your skirts. Do all the sleeves for all your dresses, that kind of thing. Okay, so that's our bodice front. Now we're going to edge our bodice back. That's 2 pieces, right? And I'm not able to see any comments right now because I'm nowhere near my phone, but when we are done, I will go and look and try to see if I see all the comments and answer any questions. So just understand that if you have a question, and you can always ask and comment after the fact too, that I will get back to you. Just not right at this moment. So I first started sewing when my daughter was a baby. I actually sewed everything for her bedroom, including her bed set. And then as she got bigger, like just a little bigger, I started making her snowsuits. And so for the first 3 years of her life, I sewed her snowsuits. And I even did a few pajama sets. Back then, my skill level wasn't as good as it is right now, so I didn't really do much in terms of like trying to sew clothing. If you're thinking of sewing clothing for your family, I highly recommend going to Goodwill's. Definitely shop fabric sale because fabric can actually be pretty expensive. And something that I would recommend for those of y'all that are into crafting and sewing, think about getting, think about stocking up on some of the items that you need. And I'm not really talking about hoarding, just make sure you have a couple of spools of the colors of thread that you like. Get some zippers, have some Velcro, some elastic. It's just a good thing to have on hand. I think most of what we buy in this country is actually made elsewhere. I don't think there's a whole lot of manufacturing in this country. So it's a good idea to have some of what you need in case you have any supply chain issues. And this isn't a gloom and doom channel. This is just practical advice. And you can even think of it as a perspective of sale shopping, right? Buy it when it's on sale. Good old-fashioned home economics, home management. that's our other bodice back. See, it's not so hard. Doesn't take too much time to go through and edge this stuff. Drink up my coffee here. My husband brought me some Dunkin' Donuts. He's addicted. I find sewing relaxing. I mean, when I first started sewing, I won't say it was all that relaxing because I admit, even though I did really well in geometry, putting shapes together to actually form an object for me is a little bit challenging. But the more you do it, the better you get at it. So don't let that hold you back. So now we're working on the sleeves. I think if you were sewing for like a human and bigger pieces, you could probably use pinking shears to cut the fabric on the edge. But these doll pieces are so small that I feel like you might lose the shape if you tried to use pinking shears on some of the pieces. I will from time to time use pinking shears on inside seams if I think it's a benefit, but it's easier just to zigzag. In case you're wondering, I'm using cotton fabric, and I did pre-wash the fabric so it doesn't shrink. As a mom, I don't remember ever washing my daughter's doll clothes, but I would hate for somebody to wash these doll clothes and shrink them, so it's better to pre-wash, dry your fabric, make sure it doesn't shrink. That's just a good practice to have in all your sewing projects. Now, some of the not natural fabrics, you might not have to worry about those shrinking, but cotton for sure. Cotton, linen, rayon, that all shrinks. So this is both of our sleeves now. We finished the edges on. And for this project, well, let me go a little bit more here. It looks like I went over the edge. For this project, we're using monotone colors. We're using black and white and gray and white. And we're going to use some dark red for the trim. Okay, next let's do our collar pieces. So for the collar pieces, there's two edges to the collar. So you're going to have a front and a back, right? We're going to edge these separately though. We're not ready to put them together. Let's just do this edge again. Loose threads as we go. Whoopsie, that doesn't sound good. Maybe we're out of bottom thread, or maybe it came. Let's go ahead and rethread this. And let's just check this thread as well. There we go. I'm not sure what happened there, but hopefully we're good to go now. Let's just go ahead and try that again. And it was this edge right here we were going to redo. Very good. Time to time, it's a good idea to take this plate off and clean any dust that you've accumulated. This fabric and the thread puts off quite a bit of dust, and you don't want to gum up your system. All right, that's one collar piece. We got 3 to go. Let's just go ahead and cut this and back up. I can see I missed a spot here. Loose threads. Two more collar pieces to go. Yeah, I know this part of it's a little time consuming and boring, but before we know it, we'll be done. And it looks like I missed an edge right here. Let's go ahead and go back over that spot. It's pretty easy to do when you're rounding corners. Totally worth it. Your finished garment is going to look so much nicer. All right, last collar piece. Yahoo! Miss Meg is right here by my feet. That's our little dog, if you've been watching any of our videos. All right, that's all our collar pieces. Scrap. Let's start on our skirt panels. So we have a front panel and we have two back panels. And this front panel is cut on a fold. So it opens up like that. Let's go ahead and zigzag our sides for this. This will be easier. This is our floral gray and white. Fabric wadded up on me a little bit right there, so we'll just start that part over. Yeah, I really like this fabric. I think it's really pretty. I don't know if I look that good in busy prints, but it's definitely pretty. I'm using most of this fabric for this dress, or for the doll dresses that I'm making, but there's enough left that I could use it as an accent on maybe a shirt or a waistline, a shoulder, a sleeve, a neckline, a collar. loose threads. Looks like we got all of this. Very good. So now we'll do the 2 pieces to the back skirt. Oops, there's our collar piece. I don't know, I just love looking at color and patterns. I don't know about the rest of y'all, but I find it quite fun. And I'm not always the best at mix matching them together, but it's kind of fun to try. Alrighty, one more back panel to zigzag, and we will be done with the zigzagging. Thanks for hanging in there with me. Very good. That is the last of our zigzagging. Let's go ahead and cut these loose threads. And I think I need to come down this edge one more time. See, I missed a couple spots. Now we really are done with the zigzagging. So for those of you that are new to these doll dress sewing projects with me, just to let you know, we are using a McCall's Craft M6526 pattern. This fits an 18-inch doll or an American Girl doll. And so far I've liked every single pattern I've tried. I'm specifically using pattern F out of that packet because I feel that it will better accommodate sewing the cancer ribbon on with the embroidery machine because it has a nice big panel, right? So these are our back skirt panels. Let's go ahead and pleat those. And so to do that, I just take the pattern and I lay it over the fabric to see where these marks are for the pleats, and then I pin it. This is my technique for marking pleats. Right, there we go. And then let's do the other side. If you've watched any of my other doll dress sewing projects, you'll have to let me know whether you feel that this camera perspective is better. Can you see what I'm doing better? I'm trying to improve on the quality of my videos. So the next thing we're going to want to do is sew our pleats together. So we're going to want to be sewing on the back side of the fabric. And how I most easily accomplish this myself is I just take and I fold the two pins together and then I pin it. And I find lately that I've been making my pleats a little too small and I've had to go back and increase them. So I'm going to aim to do a little bit wider this time. Let's see if we can get this right the first time. So while we're at it, let's just go ahead and do both sets of pleats on each panel of fabric. And it might be easier to work on this side. And got one more sewing pin tucked in here. Probably two is enough, right? Okay, so this is how this looks. Let's do the other one. Again, we're just folding the pins over on themselves to line up our pleat. And then we're just pinning again on the back side. And let's do that again on this side. And maybe it would be easier to work it from this angle. Let's figure that out. And remove our pins from underneath. Now we're ready to sew our pleats. And I think I'm going to work from the skinny end of the pleat up. So we're going to go forward and back to tie our seam off. Except that we're going to take it off of zigzag. threads. And you're just gonna wanna make sure that you start as far down on each one to try to get the length of the pleat about the same and try to end up with the same width, right? This pattern's really forgiving, so if it's not quite perfect, it's okay. And let's just make sure we don't accidentally sew over our other part of our fabric, right? That would really make for some seam ripping, which we would like to avoid. Get our pins out. All right, and you can see this first back panel, our pleats that we just put in. Let's do the next back panel. I really enjoy this sewing room that my husband made for me. It's actually half office and half sewing room, which works out perfect for both of us. And yeah, this will just work. Just want to make sure we don't accidentally sew over any part that we don't want to sew over. Let's take this one bottom pin out. There we go. These two pins out. Now let's do our next pleat, and then we can check and see how we did. And very good. We have our two pleats here. So we have our two back panels that are pleated. Now let's do our front panel. So to do this, since we did cut this on a fold, we're going to measure and put our pleats this way and then this way. So let's go ahead and mark those like we just did for the other, and actually it's this way. The center fold would be in the middle, right? So make sure you get that right. So this front skirt panel will have 4 pleats in it. And we'll flip it this way and mark our pleats on this side. So far I've sewn 2 shirts for my husband, and I have sewn a shoulder cover for myself, a dress for myself, and a rib skirt. And I would really like to sew some more clothing items for myself, especially now that I have all this beautiful fabric that I've been accumulating when I find it on sale. But right now our projects are doll dresses for our little nieces, and then also for our donation to Bowl for the Cure, we're donating 2 doll dresses for that purpose. Another project I would like to work on is I have some quilting squares that one of my grandmothers left me, actually gave me. So I'd like to learn to make a quilt. All kinds of things I want to make. Definitely the project girl if you've been following us for a little while. Whether I'm making turtles and painting them, or canning something in the kitchen, or working in the garden, we're always doing something here at this house. We're never bored. Sewing is kind of a good project for the heat, right? It's a little hot out there still, even though the temperatures are coming down. Yeah, the first time I ever had to make a pleat was in the dress that I made for myself. And I remember being so intimidated by that part of the project, and it's so easy. The moral of that story is if you're intimidated by something, go at it strong. That's how I approach those things. Next thing you know, it wasn't that bad after all. A lot of people are intimidated by zippers, and those aren't hard either. My first zipper was when I made snowsuits for my daughter. And there's a fly that found us. Oh well. And we're just folding our pins together to mark where our pleat goes, and then pinning it again and removing the inside pins. Now, one thing is I have no idea how long my phone battery is going to last, so that will affect how long we're able to do the speed. But I should be able to get quite a bit of battery out of it, or recording time. So we'll do the best we can with that. Because I would really like to do as much of this project today as possible. So I'm wanting to finish this project so I can move on to some new projects. I think it's important to finish what you start, for sure. All right, so you can see the pleats here. It's turned out pretty nice. And something that I've learned, if for some reason you don't get your pleats quite right, you can always kind of scrunch this into the bodice when you sew it in. That works too. Or you can go back and you can sew your pleat a little deeper. But I feel like we've got this pretty good now. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and attach our front and back bodice pieces together. So let's grab those. Let's see, that's the shoulder. It's this part. Okay, so this is the front and these are the two back pieces. And we are going to attach these with the right sides together. It's very important, facing your fabric correctly so you don't end up with one part right side out and one part inside out. The more you do something, the easier this gets. And I feel like this is going together really smoothly for me so far today. But it is the third dress that I've made. So it just goes to show that practice makes better. Everybody always says practice makes perfect. When I was a kid, I had a guitar teacher. I played guitar for a little while, and he said practice makes better. And I think he's right. I would agree with that. And actually, we're going to leave these bottom pieces open here. We're just going to attach the top for now. I think practice makes better because there's always room for improvement. What do you think about that idea? That, and if you do something enough time, trim your fabric colors, how you put things together. Maybe you come up with a better way of edging your fabric. If anybody's got any cool ideas on that, let me know. So now if we look at this, it looks like that, right? And the opening area is the back. So our collar pieces will attach here and our sleeves will go here. Let's work on our collar pieces next. And I went ahead with the dark. Somehow we're going to use this red trim to accent around the collar. So I'm doing it a little differently than I did the other doll dress. The other doll dress, I used a different color of collar pieces. Okay, let's just get these paired together. Make sure we have the right side and the wrong side going in the right direction, right? That. And we'll leave this flat edge open because we're going to tuck that in. Let's just go ahead and pin this. Pardon me as I take a drink from time to time. I pretty much have to drink something to keep talking like this. And I think it's really relaxing to have a nice cup of tea or coffee while you're sewing or doing a project. It was nice of my husband to get me a cup of coffee. Not that I can't make one of my own. I think these little doll dresses are so cute. The cool thing about sewing doll dresses is a lot of the shapes are used in clothing for grown-ups, right? The same shapes for sleeves and for collars, the front and the back bodice and skirt, similar ways of manufacturing. So doing a doll dress pattern will give you confidence to sew more clothing for yourself or for someone else if you so desire. Now the pieces are a little smaller to work with. And I guess I have small hands, so that's not so hard. Some of my friends don't really like working with such small pieces. I would think that Barbie doll sewing might be a little more challenging, right? Because those are definitely some small pieces. Let's see, let's position this just a little differently. There we go. That's probably good for pinning. All right. So for this, I kind of want to get as close as to the edge as I can. So a very small seam allowance. That makes it easier to turn it, and it gives you a little wider collar, right? So get as close as you can, but make sure you have integrity with your seam. When I say integrity with your seam, all I mean is just make sure that you actually went through both layers of fabric and you have your two collar pieces connected. And let's take these pins out here so we don't sew over them. You have to just go turn a little bit with the turn of the collar. So remove this piece or this needle. And we can take these pins out. Just come around this corner. And finish our seam off. And so we left this end open so we can turn it. We're also going to trim a little bit on the curves to make it not gather funky on the inside. But let's go ahead and sew the other one first, and we'll do all that at the same time. You want to be consistent with your seam width so that your collar pieces are the same size, right? Or as close as possible. Take a couple pins out here. And I am sewing barefoot. This is one of the few things I do that you can do barefoot. Get all our loose threads, get our pins out. Right, so let's make sure that our seams went all the way through on both sides. We don't have any gaps, right? Okay, very good. We got that. Now let's go ahead and just make little tiny snips. That'll just help the fabric bend when we turn this inside out and make it lay smoothly. Just little trims, right? Little snips. We're easing fabric. And there you go. This is a pretty cool little device. You can use it to push fabric through if it's something really thick and you want to watch your fingers, you don't want to sew through your fingers. And this can help you when you're turning stuff, right? And this can help you push a seam out when you're turning stuff. I think these pieces are big enough we can just turn it mostly with our fingers. think this part comes in handy, right? Because you can kind of push it a little bit. Makes it a little bit easier. Oops, don't lose the piece. I hope y'all are getting a good view here. I'm new to putting the camera up that high, but I figured you might get a better vantage point and you might be able to see what I'm doing a little better. I'm kind of new to the whole sewing on camera thing. In the kitchen, I can use my laptop, but I don't really have as much room on my sewing table because I have so much thread and I have a little sewing box over there. I'm not sure you would have as good of a vantage with a flat laptop. It'd kind of be like having the phone on a tripod. We could try that. Right, figure out how to make space. Kind of think overhead might be better, but we'll see. I'll definitely watch this video after the fact to see if I feel like you can see more. Hopefully you can. See, I'm just kind of poking this out now using my little plastic device. You could use anything you want for this, but this little plastic device works really great. It's like I need to curve this around a little bit right here. There we go. Push that out. Get our collar shape. So there's one that's turned. Let's turn the other. Have a drink of coffee. I actually about ready for my cup of tea. There we go. See, I'm all prepared. I was planning on doing a lot of sewing with y'all today. Ah, very good. Tea's a little more hydrating than coffee. I would say the collar and the sleeve is the most tedious part of this dress. With the sleeve, the hardest part is you're tucking the shoulder into the armhole of the garment to sew it. And you just have to go around very slowly as you seam it because you're working in a very small space. So all in all, it's really not that hard of a pattern. And it looks really cute. It's definitely a really girly pattern. And I'm going to use bias tape this time for my trim embellishment. Sometimes I take a strip of fabric and I just sew a tube and turn it inside out and iron it to make my own trim that way. This time I thought we'd use this nice bias tape just because it's the right color of red, I think, to offset gray and black and white. Let's see, I'm fighting with getting this part here turned. Almost got it. May have sewed this a little more narrow than the other one, I think, but just slow and steady wins the race. No point in being in a hurry. Okay, so our two pieces are going to go like this. So at this point, we need to go ahead and close off this back piece, right? Just not hard. There we go. All we're going to do is just tuck this in on itself like this, fold it over just a little bit so that we can sew it shut. Let's go ahead and pin that to hold it in place. and do the other one. I'm just folding it over the slightest amount to be able to seam it and sew it shut. So it's folding over on itself on the edge. So just keep working it till you get it lined up. And then pin it to hold it. All right, let's go ahead and seam this. And I think I will put my cheater glasses on just to make sure I see the edges good. It's a little harder with working with darker colors, I find. Whether it's making sure you've got your seam lined up or your pieces of fabric. There we go. And we're just going to sew on the very edge of this. And don't be surprised if it's a little hard, because it's kind of hard to get this to catch in your feed. So you might have to just adjust your needle location. Almost. Let's just make sure we got all of this. Looks like we did. Very good. And this part that we're sewing is going to be on the back side, so it won't be as visible. You want to do the best you can, but and trim our threads. Don't trim your fabric. In other words, you'll be starting over on that piece. So at this point you could do your sleeves, but I think since we're already working on our collar, we will go ahead and do the collar. And so we're going to actually sew this on to the back, and then we're going to be flipping it that way. So you're going to want to get this positioned dead center, right? To the best of your ability. And it should end at about the same distance on both sides of the back. That tea is really good. So I am just going to pin this as I get it positioned to hold it, right? So it stays centered. And let's pin the next side. And we're ready to sew. Can you see how I have this sewed on the inside out? So we've got where we have our collar pinned to the wrong side of the fabric for the bodice. And we still have plenty of bobbin thread. Just get our thread pulled down here through the presser feed, or through the foot, I should say. And we're going to just get as close to the edge as we can. Just a little bit of a seam allowance. And reverse to seal off our seam. Let's get this pin out of the way because it's affecting my We're just slowly going around the curve. Backwards right there. And trim our thread. Now you could just continue going around, but I kind of feel like it's a good idea to stop at the edge of the piece of the collar. But it probably doesn't matter. That's just my preference. Do it how you would like. And we will start the second piece of the collar here. Make sure you stay at an equal distance. For your seam size. Great, now we're going to turn this. So you kind of have to work this a little bit because it's going to be a little stiff and it's going to want to curve the other direction. But basically we're going to want to just pin it, right? So we'll turn it and we'll pin it. And you can see the reverse side. You want that underneath where you pin it so that it's nice, a nice edge like this. You can kind of use your thumb and your fingers to feel so that you line that up properly. Right, let's pin the other side. And it looks like I missed catching this. Let's just go ahead and sew that again right there. Trim all of our loose threads here. those are pinned. So don't trim that. Okay. Let's go ahead and trim this. Just kind of feel with your fingers to get this flat. Slow and steady wins the race. All right, so we have that pinned right there. Now we're going to be using this trim color for the waistline and the sleeves. And I kind of thought it might be nice to try this around the edge of the collar too. Let's just take a look at that for a minute and see how hard that would be to pull off. I don't know, what do you think about that? Kind of seems fun, but it does add some bulk to it. We could go ahead and just sew this down flat and think about that. We could add this trim at any point. So I'm thinking it might be good to go ahead and get the sleeves and the waistline done, and then see if we think it would look good to add this trim here to the top. So we can give that some consideration. All right, let's go ahead. And we're going to seam this because otherwise this is going to want to pop up and go back, right? We want to seam it so it lays flat. So let's go ahead and do that at this time. We're going to get right as close to the edge as we can. We're going to practically sew right along the edge. And let me adjust how I'm sitting on this chair. I'm cutting my circulation off, which we don't want to do. Pins. Sometimes the machine doesn't like to go over them if the fabric's kind of thick. That, and if you're no longer needing them, you're less likely to poke yourself with them if you take them out. So one thing I occasionally do is I occasionally poke myself with those pins. Then I'm going for a Band-Aid for sure, right? Don't want to bleed all over your project. I think I'm just going to take a look real fast and just double check our battery life on our phone. So I wouldn't want to run out of battery on y'all. Probably still doing good, but I'm not sure. Look at how cute this collar is. This is going to be so cute. I actually really like that. All right, I'm going to just peek real fast and check our battery. Make sure we're doing all right. And I can't actually tell how I'm doing with the battery. Hey, it looks like we have some people joining us. Hi out there. Thanks for joining us. All right, let's get back to this. So next we're going to work on our sleeves. going to want to gather our sleeves to create a little puff on it, right? So if you look at these ones that I've already done, this is puffy because we gather along here on both sides. Makes it a little cuter. And I just do that by hand with needle and thread. So let's just pull a little thread out. Get a needle. Sure, there's one on this somewhere. Here we go. And grab the cheater glasses, right? There we go, got that. And so we're going to want to gather this from about here on both sleeves. If you look at the pattern, it's marked. Let's do it on the inside. And this is super easy to do. It's going to go through that loop there, right? So it doesn't pull through the fabric. I'm just going to do a loose seam like that, because we'll be able to pull it as we go. To create a little gather. Doesn't have to be too puffy, just a little bit. Okay, and then just pull it a little bit to create a little bit of a gather. See how we're forming the top of the shoulder there. And we will go ahead and tie this off the same way we tied it off to start the gather. And cut our thread. So you can see we have that puffed right there, just with that simple gathering technique, very easy. And you know, we probably need just a little more thread than that. Let's go ahead and grab us some fresh thread. All right, let's do sleeve number 2. I always like to go through the loop of the thread to keep it from pulling through the fabric. And then just do a loose stitch all the way around the edge so we can gather it. When we sew the sleeve into the armhole, it will hold the gathering in place. just creating the gathering. And let's just gently pull and create our gathering. And before we tie it off, we'll just double check to make sure that our gathering is pretty consistent. We have a similar amount of puffiness on both sleeves. And I think we're doing a pretty good job with that. Let's go ahead and tie our thread off. And cut our thread. So now we have two sleeves that we've gathered the tops on. We're ready to go ahead and position that in the armholes of the bodice and sew those in. Now this is where you have to be really careful that you don't accidentally sew your sleeve in inside out, right? So one way to make sure you have that right is position your sleeve and then turn it right side out to make sure that you have it going the right direction. So basically we're going to want to have the sleeve going inwards like this, right? So we're going to pin it this way. And actually before we do that, let's go ahead and close the bottom of our sleeve up. So let's go out like this. We'll pin that and we'll seam the bottom of the arm sleeve. It's amazing how much faster this goes if you've done it a few times. The first time I did this, it took me forever because I would have to pause at each step where I got a little nervous or anxious about what I was doing, and now it's a piece of cake. So never be afraid to try anything new. It's definitely warm today. A good day to not be doing anything in the kitchen, right? Turn this back right side out. Such a cute little sleeve. And this is the shoulder where it's puffy. Let's do the same thing to the other side. And Miss Meg, here's something. What is it? Huh? What is it? Oh, what a good girl. She is my watchdog. And my buddy. Maybe Daddy's home. We'll find out here soon. All right, let's get this positioned. Make sure we have the middle, right? So we have it centered. And the last time I did this, I pinned part of the sleeve and came back and did the other part so that I wasn't trying to work with all those pins at once. Made it a little bit easier because this is another part of this project that can be a little bit hard. And the biggest thing with the sleeve, other than getting it positioned, is you want to make sure that your seam is deep enough that it covers up your gathering stitch, right? And make sure you keep your gathers even as you pin your sleeve in, because we're going to sew those in place. I think it's pretty forgiving. Those are my recommendations. And again, you can double check that you have it facing the right direction, right, by turning it right side out. That's a surefire way to make sure you don't sew your sleeve in inside out and then have to rip your seam out. Because I've done that before, and I'm thinking anybody else that's new to sewing probably does it too. And probably if you get in too big of a hurry, even if you're experienced at sewing, you could end up accidentally sewing your sleeve in inside out. Let's just skip that. This is the tedious part. Let's go ahead and get this position. Make sure we don't sew over anything we don't want to sew over. And you want to give yourself about 1/4 of an inch at the bottom. So make sure you don't sew that shut, right? Right. Let's see how we're doing so far. Reposition our pins, cut our threads. And check out this little cool thing. It's got a weight in it, and it's a little bag, so you can throw all your little scraps while you're sewing in here so you don't end up with a bunch of thread on the floor. It's very handy. I have one I bought, and I have one that my friend Kim made me. Fabulous. I would recommend having those on every sewing table you have. This makes it so much easier. Get all of our pins. Right here. And we will reposition our pins. Continue sewing here. Just take your time on this part so you don't make a mistake and sew anything together that you don't want to. It's not a race. One great thing about sewing is you can always put it down. If you've got something else that comes up, living things come first, right? Sewing second, or third. And when we get to the bottom of the sleeve, we're going to kind of catch up the side of the shirt into it and seam that shut. So make sure you leave yourself about 1/4 of an inch for that. All right, let's just do a little more sewing here. I never do this part exactly the same, but it ends up the same. I don't know if that makes sense. We're going to want to pick up where we left off, get our our needle repositioned. Be careful not to sew over anything you don't want to sew over, right? So you just kind of have to roll it forward, the sleeve part, as you go. That's what I do. Looks like my pin came loose. It's all right. We'll just keep following it around. Just watch your fingers. This is definitely the most tedious part of this project. Capture those threads. So what I'm going to do now to finish off the bottom of this sleeve is I am actually going to sew the bottom of the bodice together and catch up the bottom edge of the sleeve. Actually I need to do a little more on this part right here first. So let's do that. A little more of this one. And actually I need to pin it so it stays in position. Okay. Remove our pin, and let's pin our sides of our bodice together to catch up the bottom of the sleeve. Let's get that lined up and pin it. And I think I'm going to sew from the bottom up. Let's trim our seams and see how we did there. That pin there. Right, very good. That worked perfectly. You can see how we got our side seamed up and we have our sleeve sewn in, catching the bottom edge of the sleeve into the side seam. Awesome. Let's do the other side. Okay. Make sure we have our shoulder facing the right direction, right? And make sure it's centered. Make sure your gathering stays consistent along the top of your shoulder edge, right? As you put it in. And let's get it lined up on the sewing machine. Get our last sleeve sewed in, and you can do a quick check, make sure, yep, facing the right direction. That may seem silly, but if you ever sew a seam in backwards or inside out, you will understand the value of doing that last check. Seam that off, cut our threads and reposition our pins. Let's take a look and see how we're doing. It's going pretty good. We just need to seam a little more along here and then catch our side up into our sleeve, right? Or our sleeve up into our side. Okay. Do a little more pinning here. This will probably be the most sewing I've done on a doll dress in one day. Usually I break it up into parts, but I really want to finish this. Seeing that I made a commitment to donating this to the Bowl for a Cure fundraiser. Okay, let's go ahead and seam this. Threads. And let's go over to the other side. Hopefully I made this look easy for y'all, so you won't be intimidated by it if you ever try it yourself. Hope you do. I know if you're a mother or a father, you're busy with your career, trying to support your family, you don't always have time to do projects like this, to make a special gift for a child. But the great thing about sewing, if you just plan to do it, you can do little bits of this at a time, right? So let's go ahead and pin our sides of our bodice together and catch our sleeve up in there. Okay. When my daughter was young, I sewed stuff for her bedroom and I sewed her snowsuits, but I didn't really quite have this skill level, but I didn't really have the time to invest in it either. It's not that hard. I kind of wish I would have tried. I know she loved to play with dolls, and she was always putting her cat in her doll dress too, the bigger doll dresses, right? And be like, make sure your kitty can use the bathroom. And go ahead and cut your threads. Alrighty, we have a top, a bodice with sleeves. And it doesn't look like much just yet, but we're going to go ahead and attach the skirt part to this dress now. So to do that, first we're going to attach the front and the back of the skirt together. So this is the front and this is the back. We're going to put our front sides together to sew it together. Just pin it. And we're not completely done with our sleeve yet. We still need to put the trim on our sleeve, which we will use as a casing for elastic. I'll have to double check the pattern for the length of the elastic. I'm thinking it's around 6 inches, but I'll verify that before we cut that, along with the trim. I guess we actually could have done that part before we attached the sleeve to the bodice, but that's okay. All right, let's go ahead and sew up the sides of the skirt. I bet Mr. Painter is sitting in a coffee shop watching me sew this dress. Would not surprise me. Oops, see, that's not good. Well, we just broke a needle. Did we break it? Don't want to do that. All right, let's go ahead and remove our garment. And let's just go ahead and assume we bent the needle. It doesn't look bent. That's kind of bizarre. I'm going to assume that it is bent. Let's put a fresh needle in. Not that hard to do. All right, there's our needle. Let's go ahead and take the presser foot off. Let's get our thread out of the way. Undo our little screw. Might as well put some glasses on for this part. Make sure that gets all the way up in there. Screw it back in. Very good. Put our foot back on. And rethread our needle. I must have hit one of the sewing pins head on, right? Easy peasy. Most of the time it's not a problem to sew over sewing pins, but once in a while that happens where you just happen to hit the pin dead on with the needle, and there goes your sewing needle. And just make sure you always have lots of needles on hand. I would definitely buy those in bulk if you're serious about doing any sewing. There's nothing worse than being on a roll with a project and not having a needle when you need it, right? So let's see how we're doing here. It's looking pretty good. So the next thing we want to do is we want to sew up the bottom of the back of the skirt, but we're going to leave this section open because we're going to have a Velcro closure that connects to the bodice there, right? So for now, let's just sew this bottom edge. It's about 4 inches. Make sure you get it lined up really good. And what I usually do is I do my seam and I just kind of come up here and curve just around right there at the bottom, which is pretty much what they do in any garment that you wear. So you can double check that. Sometimes if you get stuck sewing and you're doing something you haven't done before, go find a similar item of clothing and look and see how it was done. I've done that multiple times, especially the first time that I sewed shirts for my husband. And I wasn't quite sure how the parts went together. I went and grabbed a shirt out of the closet, and that helped immensely. Okay, let's cut our thread, remove our pins. And turn this inside out. And I think we can go ahead and connect this to the bodice now. Might as well, right? So you just want to make sure you get this perfectly centered. We're just going to pin the bodice to the skirt. And we're putting the right sides together for this step. And go ahead and pin it all the way around. just to make sure that the back lines up properly, right? That way you'll know for sure that you have it pinned evenly. And adding the bodice to the skirt is so much easier than doing the sleeve. Except, it looks like I did something funky here. Let's see, what did I do? It's all right, we will get that fixed. Work it all the way around to the back. And then let's come over to the side. Work this around to the back. Got about a 1/2 inch there, so we're going to want to have about a 1/2 inch here. Sounds like Meg, it's okay. It's Daddy.
Daddy, you want a treat? Come on,
Well,
let's
I
get
think-
a treat.
I think we're going to pause here on this note. Hope we didn't lose too much. Thank you for joining us today. Thanks for watching.